Yeah, so this is really exciting. This is the first in a series of webinars that we have. And the objective of these webinars is to really focus on the practicalities of smallholder agroecological production in Southern Africa. And may I just add that, of course, this is really also not only the basis of good, healthy food systems that we all survive on in our region, but really is also absolutely critical if we are going to address the multiple crises of climate change and malnutrition and inequality and injustice on our continent. And that's particularly for women, that we can really support this very bottom-up movement to support the growth of agroecology on the region and organic production. So thank you. So there's a poll that has just come up on your screens. We would welcome you to fill that in so that we know a little bit about who is with us here, and also about some of the things that people are interested as we go forward into this webinar series. And I think people have already mentioned on the chat, please do feel free to add your names if you'd like to be added to mail lists, further updates, and also so that we can get to know each other and share more information from these webinars. We've deliberately had them so that they're running week after week after week in short sessions, so that we can really grapple with a particular issue. And if there are things that people are really interested in, then we can do a follow-up and go into more details on that particular topic. So this is a networking event. Please do share where you're coming from, perhaps some links to your own resources that you would like to share with others. So thank you so much. So just I'm sure many have seen the overview, but the other topics that we're looking at that will be coming next week and in a weekly series from now. Today we're looking at seeds, which is my personal love and a privilege to be able to talk about. And then next week we're going to be looking at practicalities of soil fertility options for smallholder farmers, and then looking at managing pests and diseases in organic production, then appropriate technologies, which is a really critical area and less focused on, I think, in a lot of the investment now that's going into production systems. A lot is around big tech rather than appropriate technologies. So that's going to be a really important discussion. Again, hearing from experts working on the ground. And then a final in this series looking at what are the conversion considerations to go poison free. So what does it mean? What does it take to really transition to organic agroecological production? So without wasting any further time, really happy to have the two experts with us today. And this is Juliet Nangamba from Community Technology Development Trust in Zambia, and Frederick Sanga from the Biodiversity Conservation Initiative in Malawi, up in northern Malawi in Zimzuzu. So both have a long history of working with seed and farmers, and also are seed activists in their own respective spaces. So Juliet is going to present first, and Juliet has more than 10 years experience working and advocating for recognition of farmer managed seed systems. She's a qualified master trainer in participatory plant breeding and actively engaged in local and international networks, focusing on ensuring Africa's food sovereignty. So thank you so much, and please go ahead, Juliet. Thank you. You should be able to share your screen.
Thank you so much, Francis, for that introduction. I'll just begin sharing my screen now. Just give me a thumbs up if you're able to hear me clearly.
Yes.
I'll be happy to know. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Juliet Nangamba. I'm from the Community Technology Development Trust in Zambia, and I work a lot with we work a lot with smallholder farmers, and we're also engaged a lot in participatory plant breeding. And I'm also a master trainer in participatory plant breeding, as earlier introduced by Francis. So most of my sharing is actually based on our experience at Community Technology Development Trust And we believe our experience is what is practical when it comes to sustainable seed systems, either seed breeding, banking for smallholder farmers in Africa. So why should we focus on seed breeding, storing, saving, and banking? So at CTGT, we believe that this helps actually to strengthen farmers' participation as key stakeholders in the seed sector and promote farmers' practices. As we all know, we know that farmers actually are the ones that have been from time immemorial, advancing our germplasm to the level that it has reached now. So farmers are breeders and are managers of our agrobiodiversity systems. We are also involved in this work to enhance access to broad range of crops, and we try to address issues around quality, commercialization, and we do this through breeding as well as saving and storing and seed banking. We've seen that the work that we do around this topic actually enhances community cohesion and collective ownership of germplasm. I think over the years since the inception of the Green Revolution, we've seen that germplasm ownership has actually been with multinational corporates, but with the work that we're doing, we see that we'll actually ensure that germplasm is collectively owned. Engaging in seed breeding, storing, and saving ensures conservation and development of crop genetic diversity. So here it offers an opportunity actually to look at the crops that former seed systems will not focus on a lot, because then we'll be looking at crops that are really the farmers are really interested to work with. We've also seen that it's important to focus on this aspect because we need to increase the capacity of farmers to adapt to climate change. We've seen that climate change has become a big threat now in Southern Africa and across the globe. So it's important that we actually ensure that there's multiple sources of seed access for communities to adapt to climate change. We also do this work to foster and promote agroecological farming system. And overall, we want to address farmers' rights. So we are developing the evidence for addressing farmers' rights in terms of policy. And all the work that we do is centered on promoting farmers' rights. The pictures you are seeing is just some of the work that we do. The picture on your far top left is a seed bank in Chirundu. These are farmers. The other two pictures are farmers, participating in participatory, in seed breeding. So how is this seed breeding done? So we use participatory plant breeding as an approach through which we can engage in seed breeding and to ensure sustainable seed systems. At the moment, we have 1,863 farmers participating in participatory plant breeding, and these farmers are organized in farmer field schools, and we have organized 63 farmer field schools on participatory plant breeding. The three approaches that we have under participatory plant breeding include participatory variety development, where farmers are involved in creation of new varieties, participatory variety enhancement, where farmers are involved in enhancing varieties that have lost their farmers' desirable trait, and we're also engaged in participatory variety selection, where farmers actually select varieties that are suited for their local environment. So all this just helps farmers to manage their diversity as well as breed crops that are adapted to their environment. And this, I think this is a very important take home that we all need to have. If you are going to engage in this work, is to ensure that you are breeding crops that are suited for the environment where the farmers are. So to do this work, we follow certain processes, and we one needs certain skills to engage in participatory plant breeding. So if you're going to engage in the process, one needs to understand, the importance of biodiversity and its management. One will require to have good facilitation and communication skills. One needs to understand the constraints that are faced within the farming communities when it comes to seed access and availability, seed storage and issues around conservation. One needs to understand and have a good, effective collaboration with public research institutes, because at some point, if farmers cannot access seed within the communities, then you might need, to engage breeding institutes to provide you, breeding materials that you are going to engage in participatory plant breeding. To foster a holistic seed systems, we believe that farmers, breeders, all stakeholders must come together to ensure that our seed systems are sustainable. And this is why we actually promote collaborations. So what is the process? On this slide, you see a lot of pictures of farmer trainings, a lot of program. This is some of the product of the participatory plant breeding. But the first process that you need to follow to start a seed breeding is you need to build a lot of capacity for facilitators that are going to, to facilitate participatory plant breeding in the communities. And these facilitators who need to understand tools that are able to give a clear picture of what is happening in the community with regards to diversity, with regards to the changes that are happening in the community, and they'll use certain tools like the diversity wheels and the timeline analysis. They also need to set clear breeding objectives with the community, so that the work that they're doing actually addresses the challenges that are faced within the communities. So there's a lot of selection that goes on also, because we need to select, varieties or crops that are, suited to the local environment. You also need to evaluate these, need to evaluate whatever varieties are selected, so that they're actually meeting the traits that are desired by the farmers. And at the end of the process, you also need to disseminate within the communities, so that a wider community has access to the varieties and information around the seeds that are developing within the community. So I spoke about the 3 areas of participatory plant breeding. Is this practical? Yes, and this is what we have managed to achieve with the work that we're doing. So when we talk about participatory variety enhancement, as we see in this picture, it is a process that allows you to, restore a variety that has lost desirable traits. So what happens here is that farmers actually pick through the process of training and facilitation in the farmer field school, they might decide to work on a variety just to restore trait. And here, farmers just actually intensify the practice that they are already doing by applying high selection pressure on the crop that they are working on, either positive or negative selection pressure. Depending on the crop, it's going to be different. For maize, you apply a high selection pressure when the maize needs vegetative stage. After flowering, you start selecting positively. So these are the crops. You see that this field here, where there are people, where my arrow is a bit spacious for a maize field because of the selection that has gone on. So you just want to make sure that you are leaving the best of the best in the field. You take out all that you don't need from your field and leave the cream so that you have a variety that is maintained and that has the original characteristics that were in those varieties. And this approach actually works for local varieties this is the approach that we use to restore local varieties. So I think a lot of times people always say that our local crops are low yielding, they're not performing well, but you can actually restore them so that they can go back to their original state that they were in. You just need to play around with the traits and the selection. And this is the normal practice that farmers do. So we just want to make it, more visible and done at a much large scale. So you can see these women, they're selecting their best crops that they will use for the planting in the next season. And the picture in the bottom on my far right, where my arrow is, it just shows the crops that are selected that will be used for the next season. If it was another company or somewhere in another space, they'll be showing that farmers actually have got, little crops, their crops are very low yielding. This is not the case. So yes, it's practical to improve even the local varieties and maintain them and have them in a good state where farmers can actually have yield. So we have maintained 4 maize varieties. We have enhanced and maintained 4 maize varieties using participatory variety enhancement. And then the other approach is the PVS, participatory variety selection. This is very common, and this is what breeders actually use. But the problem in the formal sector is that it comes at the end of the breeding, where farmers are just used to select the varieties. But we're saying to breeders that no, you should start early in engaging the farmers to ensure that they're selecting crops that are actually adapted to their local environment. So if you see in these pictures, we have fields that are showing different types of varieties within the crop, and farmers then select what performs well in that season and carry it forward to the next season. This we try to actually compare how the commercial varieties and local varieties perform. So most of a lot of our pharmaceuticals are actually based on participatory variety selection. What is mind-blowing is that farmers have actually preferred to select their local indigenous materials as compared to some of the varieties that come in because of the traits that they prefer in their local materials. So some of the varieties that have been selected actually include, we have adopted 8 varieties, which include some of our local indigenous varieties, as well as the improved varieties. So this is a much simpler process, because farmers just look and see what is performing well when the climate is like this, and they have to do the research over a period of 3 years to make sure that the results are consistent. It's just not one season, then you are done with your participatory plant breeding. Even for the participatory variety enhancement, you have to do it at least for 3 seasons or for 3 years to ensure that your results are consistent, and they are meeting your research objective. So in the participatory variety selection, we have worked with sorghum, groundnuts, finger millet, and cowpeas. And our source of the materials has been from the public breeding institutes, the gene banks, and the materials within the communities. Then the other breeding approach under the PPB, it is the participatory variety development. This is more technical, and it requires that you actually work very closely and collaborate with breeding institutes. And we work a lot with the Zambia Agricultural Research Institute in Zambia, which is ZARI, because they are the institution that are mandated to do public breeding. So we do a lot of capacity building for the facilitators, as well as the breeders so that they can understand the farmer approach, because sometimes we have seen that breeders are more focused on, developing traits that are actually just addressing, yields, but farmers are looking at a wider range of traits, including how long, seed stores in the granary, or how long they can keep the seed, because sometimes you find that there are years when the rain pattern is not so good and they're unable to produce enough. They'll need to have varieties that stay longer or store longer within, within storage. So here, farmers actually cross two different, materials in order to develop a variety that captures or has the traits that they would like to see in a variety. So for this, we've been doing participatory variety development in Chirundu, working with sorghum, where farmers identified two different varieties that had two characteristics that they liked and also negative traits that they did not like, and they thought of combining these varieties. This is where the participatory plant breeding work started in Chirundu. So farmers are involved in the setting of the traits. They are also involved in the selection. They're involved in the entire breeding process. They set up winter nurseries, off-season nurseries where they can continue the breeding process, but they always need to work closely with the breeder so that they are doing the breeding they are following the breeding process. I think this is very important then, because it helps the breeders to understand also what are the needs of the breeder, rather than developing material somewhere and bringing it in the community. So this is very important because the material is developed within the localities of the farmers and will be in the reach of, where the farmers are, and it will be easily adapted to, the environment of the farmers. We have developed 5 sorghum varieties now, which we are working on with maize. There are 2 OPV varieties that are created through mass selection. In order to make sure that this knowledge that is generated within the communities doesn't just end up in the farmer field schools, we also carry a lot of, dissemination activities around our PPB work, participatory plant breeding work. So we conduct field days. So if there are materials that have been selected from the PVS trials that are planted maybe on large scale for seed production, this picture is showing actually one of the varieties that was selected from the PVS. And there was a big field day to just, inform farmers that this is happening. This is a variety that was adapted. We also conduct community sensitization meetings where farmers are given information around what is happening around the PPB work. We also do a lot of radio programs to involve a wider community, because we believe that seed access and availability is one of those things that builds community resilience. Seed fairs are also a platform that we use to ensure that there's a lot of knowledge sharing and also exchange of seed and access and sharing of some of the materials that are coming out from the participatory plant breeding work. And we also participate a lot in national events. We recently won the prize as the best climate initiative, because people are actually appreciating the work that is happening in the community as a means to adapt to climate change. I will speak. I've spoken a lot about seed breeding. I'll speak a little around seed saving and the work that we are doing. So we're saying that seed saving and banking and storing begins at household level. You can see a lot of diversity in these pictures, containers with seed and different kinds of seed. But without the diversity at household, it means that we will not have, the diversity at community level. So to ensure that there's diversity in the community, we must also promote diversity at household level. So we're engaged a lot in seed banking activities, and to ensure successful seed banking and seed saving, farmers must also understand the importance of crop diversity for their communities and the changes that are occurring within their communities with regards to agrobiodiversity. In the past, when we started this work, we had limited agrobiodiversity in the communities because of the climate that was changing, because of infiltration of new, improved varieties, sometimes which were not serving the farmers' interests. But with a lot of information around the importance of crop diversity, we've seen that this diversity has started coming back to the communities. And also there must be an understanding of the impacts of the changes when what are the impacts when we lose diversity? What will be the impact on nutrition? How does it impact our ability to adapt to climate change? What about the market? What about the socio-economic context? How are all those things impacted? So we've set up now, after working with the household level and ensuring that there's diversity at household level, we are now working at community level where we have community seed banks. This is, farmers are going to, if they understand really what is going on and the impacts, the importance, they are going to be very key in participating and, ensuring that the work is developed. So these are some of the seed banks that we have constructed with the farmers. This is the structure of the seed bank, and farmers participating in maintaining and developing the seed banks. Women, you can see women actually compacting soil in the seed bank, making sure that their seed bank is constructed and is up. This is just the inside of the seed banks that we have and the much diversity that is within the communities. With those little few words, I will end my presentation here, and I'll take questions when the time for questions come, and I'll watch out for the questions in the question box.
Juliet, thank you so much. Always really wonderful hearing from you and CTDT's really, really amazing work that has just exploded over the last couple of years. And it just shows the focus, the importance, and the demand for this work, and this relationship that is built between farmers and also our public breeding and agriculture institutes, and how important that relationship is. And that really is the basis of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources and Farmers' Rights, that really farmers are supported so that they can improve their varieties and maintain these and adapt to climate change in situ, rather than ex situ in a gene bank on the other side of the world that then loses the local context and what is really appropriate. So I think that emphasis on breeders and agricultural researchers knowing farmers' contexts, rather than often farmers are the ones who are having to adapt themselves to outside context. So thank you so much. There are already a couple of questions that I would like to go to directly in the box, and then I think we'll try and answer these, Juliet, and then if there are more, then we can keep them to the end after the next presentation. So I think a really interesting one that was posted first is, how does the variety diversity wheel work? Juliet, I think it's a very interesting tool. So it'd be lovely to hear about that. And then there's also questions about, where else does CTDT do its work? Can you go and do some breeding and support in other places? Kitwe, across Zambia, all of these places are needing. And then, is participatory seed breeding the same as seed multiplication? So it's interesting to think about some of the differences when we're looking at what does it really mean to keep and store seed and adapt for climate change. So thank you so much. So over to you, Juliet. You can answer some of those. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll start with how does the variety wheel work? So there are two, the variety wheels, there are two. There's one variety wheel for crops and one variety wheel for crop diversity wheel and crop variety wheel for crops. 2, a crop diversity wheel, variety wheel for crops. So these tools, we actually use them to engage the levels of diversity in the, in the community. So farmers will see which crops are being grown more, to what extent are they being grown, which crops are lost. When we go to the variety wheel, now when we go into the participatory plant breeding, we want to understand a little bit more about the characteristics of the crop. Like if you want to know, Juliet, you want to know what is maybe the production rate of Juliet. So we'll start, listing those traits that we want, the traits that we like, the traits that we don't like in a particular crop. So that when we're making the, the breeding objective, when going into a participatory plant breeding, we're already informed on what kind of traits we are going to work on, what kind of traits we need to improve, or which crop has, lost its traits and needs to be restored. So it just helps us to understand the diversity in the communities, the level of diversity, the characteristics of the, the varieties within the crop that we want to work with. So that's how we use it. It's a whole long process that one needs to engage in and engages in with the farmers. It's, you facilitate a discussion where you ask the farmers what has changed about these crops, how many farmers are growing these crops in maybe a small area or large area. So yeah, so it helps you to just kind of see where the diversity is within the community. Then, do we work in Kitwe? No, we don't work in Kitwe, unfortunately. We work in Chikankata, Rufumsa, Chirundu, and Shibuyunji districts. And obviously, this is because of some limitations that we might face in terms of reaching all areas. But one thing that we're doing now is to start working with the public research institutions more so that we can institutionalize the process of participatory plant breeding, so that when they're doing their breeding work, it's not done the normal way, but they are carrying on, they're starting to do breeding work with the farmers at a very early stage or at the inception of breeding. We wish, yes, we can be in all the areas, and we are here to support for those people that want to engage in this kind of work.
Thank you, Juliet. And I think that is a really, really important thing, is that this work becomes the norm. It's institutionalized actually within public breeding institutions, because farmers have a right to be able to breed their own seed and get that support from governments. It's not just about big commercial seed production that is suited to yields rather than the local context. And as you say in the chat there, about nutrition and what are the local traits. So that's really, really important. And I think that's also the power of sharing on these kind of spaces, because there's a lot of other work that CTDT are doing and other organizations across the region supporting this kind of work. So this is really an area that we can try and now share who is doing what, where, and connect with each other on that. So Juliet, I would just like you to answer one more question if possible, because I think it was very important to think about the difference between participatory seed breeding and seed multiplication. And I think that's quite important, how we think about breeding and then multiplying, and why that is very important for farmers. If you could quickly answer that one for us.
Yeah, so with seed multiplication and seed breeding are two different processes. So at the end of my presentation, I think I was showing a field day where there were people that were attending a field day where seed was being multiplied. So I think seed multiplication is a final process that comes after seed breeding. Often the quantities that are involved in seed breeding are very little. So at the end, you want to multiply them. But this is why we also need to ensure that our, local seed systems are being promoted, because for us in the rural communities, the seed that you find, the germplasm that you find in the community seed bank is still considered as seed. So the moment you get that germplasm and start planting it, increasing the quantities, then you're also seed multiplying, but you're not seed breeding. So seed multiplication is more to do with increasing quantities of seed rather than, working with traits and all this technical language and, crossing, selection pressure. You just want to specifically increase quantities of seed when you're engaged in seed multiplication. It could be seed multiplication of an advanced line, seed multiplication of your local variety in your seed bank, rather than seed breeding is now the actual technical work of, whether improving varieties through enhancement or developing a new variety, or just, selecting from existing varieties. I hope, yeah. So that is the difference.
Thank you so much, Juliet. It's for people who are not breeders, it sounds very complicated. And I think that's why these questions are really important. And please continue to put your questions in the chat, because these are then things that we can see this is a real interest. This is where people need more information. And then we can do follow-up conversations and share knowledge, particularly on those focus areas. So thank you. Please carry on putting questions there. We're going to have a short, very, very short one little film clip showing now. And then we're going to move on to Frederick's presentation. But Juliet is with us, and I'm sure you will be looking at some of those questions, Juliet. So if I may try to share my screen, if everyone can give me a moment. Juliet, can you see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
So hopefully, can you hear?
Yes.
My children, remember what fed you when you were young. Remember what brought you up. It is the very seeds that are being abandoned nowadays. The seeds we have are your rights. The seed we have are your identity. The seeds we have are your power. Do not rely on the other seeds that you don't know how they were bred. You don't know how they behave. They come in and phase out easily. I urge you to preserve the seeds. Remember to preserve and keep them for the next generation. The seeds are part of you.
So that is a very powerful, short little clip. And the voice from Mama Mary Sakala, who lives in Mumbwa, outside Mumbwa in Zambia, and who is actually chairperson of the Community Technology Development Trust, Juliet's organization, as well as part of the Rural Women's Assembly of Zambia and in Southern Africa. So that's a very powerful message of reminder from Mrs. Sakala. So thank you, Juliet. And I'm now going to welcome Frederick Sanga from Biodiversity Conservation Initiative in Malawi. Thank you so much. Fred is an agronomist with over 10 years of experience working in resource-challenged smallholder farmers, communities, and conserving plant-genetic resources for food and agriculture, particularly under the international treaty, and including the establishment of agrobiodiversity community seed banks. And BCI is a part of the Seed and Knowledge Initiative as well. And Frederick has been doing a lot of work in Malawi and with farmers for a long time. So thank you so much, Frederick. We really, really appreciate you being here today. I'm going to hand directly over to you. do you think you can share do you want to try sharing your screen, your presentation? You can get going. It's like, wonderful, I can see it. Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francis, for this opportunity to present and also to connect with the various people who are participating in this webinar. As he mentioned, my name is Frederick Sanga. I work with the Biodiversity Conservation Initiative based in Mzuzu. I am the project coordinator. So for close to a decade, I've been involved with the conservation of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, as well as the establishment of community seed banks as means of conserving plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, as well as increasing access to locally adapted farmer varieties. So really, my presentation will mainly focus on my experiences working with smallholder farmers around issues of seed, as well as community seed bank. So why are we talking about seed? Seed is the most basic input in agriculture, and among farming communities, seed is very, very important. It is not news to say that today's food production is dependent on a narrow genetic base. Mostly, we see the promotion of maize monocultures, which has resulted into loss of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, along with its associated traditional knowledge and innovations that farmers have developed over a long period of time. The practice of saving seed among farmers has been there for a long period of time. As I mentioned earlier, that farmers save seed at household level. However, saving seed at household level has got its own challenges because farmers can't maintain can't keep large varieties, but also farmers, they can't keep quality seed for a long time. And sometimes farmers, they end up consuming what they had kept as a seed. So really, much as they keep seed at household level, they also face challenges. However, the introduction of community seed banks around 1980s came in at least to increase access to good quality seed among farmers and also conserve plant genetic resources. So this collective work really ensures that farmers have access to good quality seed, and they are also conserving plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. In the picture, you can see farmers have gathered at one of our community seed banks that we work with. They are paying back the seed that they accessed from the community seed bank. So in the next slides, I'll talk about the process of establishing a community seed bank. So how do you establish a community seed bank? So from experience, you need to mobilize farmers who have got interest as well as knowledge on the materials that the farmers use. This would be local adapted materials that they use for food as well as nutrition security. This is done through conducting community meetings with key farmers, in this idea of feedback. Once that is done, then you set up groups that will then work as farmers in managing, conserving, and multiplying seed. So you can start small. Small is always beautiful. So you can start, say, with 40 farmers. depending on the interest. But if you have many farmers wishing to join, then the numbers can be bigger. So once you have that group of 40 or so farmers, then you need to facilitate the process of developing a constitution. In that constitution, you also include the objectives of that group. Is it whether to conserve germplasm? Is it whether to multiply seed? So most of the seed banks that I work with, they are involved in conservation of germplasm as well as multiplication of seed. So the constitution will highlight that, but you also need to write down the governance issues, mainly the rules and regulations of the group. Since you are dealing with groups, at least there must be some rules and regulations, how the seed bank will be run and how the members should conduct themselves. Once that is done, then you also need to facilitate the process of establishing a management committee. All these processes is not a facilitator or an extension worker doing it. It's the farmers who will be able to give input to the objectives, the rules and regulations, as well as the community is the one which will select the management committee of a seed bank. The management committee will comprise a chairperson and the vice secretary, treasurer, and some committee members. In our case, our management committee is made up of 11 people. One of them is a community leader who is very influential, and that person holds the position of a patron or can be a matron of the group. Deliberately, this was done to ensure that issues to do with the misconduct, then the patron or matron can handle those issues locally. So it's a community leader who is very influential in that community. But you also have to ensure that the seed bank is well resourced in terms of stationaries, because there is a lot of record keeping. So they must have let's say hardcovers where they will be entering information about the seed that the seed bank is keeping, the varieties, the membership, those who are accessing seed, as well as the quantity. So there's a whole lot of information that the seed bank will be keeping, and this is done by the secretary or of the management committee. In order to have community seed banks that are sustainable, it is very important to include income generation activities. For example, farmers can be involved in aggregating their produce and selling the seed. So these are deliberate actions that are done to ensure that there is sustainability in the seed banks that the farmers are working in. And one important aspect is also access to land. Because we are talking of a seed bank, it really needs to have seed. So to have seed, there must be some multiplication of the seed, which will need land. And also for on-farm conservation, the seed bank will also need some land. So the issue of land is very important. We shouldn't have a very big piece of land. Land is a challenge. They can have, let's say, an acre, 0.4 hectares. You know, at least farmers can conserve the materials on farm. But for multiplication, the farmers then can multiply the seed in their fields. After that, then you look at storage facilities. Where will seed be kept? Is it in farmers' houses if they don't have structures? In our case, we have community seed bank structures. Currently, we are working with 4 community seed bank structures. So for those who don't have a structure, then they can decide who would keep the seed. They can select the members among the group to keep the seed. As you can see, that is a seed backed in one of the seed banks that we work with in northern Malawi, in Lumpi. When stocking the seed bank, you need to understand the diversity of that area. So there are various tools that are used. Juliet mentioned one of them. She mentioned the diversity wheel. There is also fossil analysis. Diversity wheel is an improvement of the fossil analysis where they added a circle at the center to show lost diversity. But in our work to understand or measure abundance as well as distribution of local crop diversity, we use the fossil analysis tool. So it has got fossils which have got markings. For example, to above the horizontal line, you have large area and many households. In this one, you look for crops that are grown on a large piece of land as well as grown by many farmers. You also have a large area and few households. So for this one, you try to analyze crops that are grown on a large piece of land, but with a few households. Below the horizontal line, you have small area. So you look at crops that are grown on a small piece of land, but with many households, and also those grown on a small piece of land with few households. Those that are found above, during the analysis, that are found above this horizontal line, most of them are abundant because those that are found on the left of the vertical line, they are common because they are grown by many households. But those that are found to the right of the horizontal line, they are not common because they are grown by few households. So for you to really have a very good data, you need to define the size of the areas. We work in different communities with different access to land in terms of the size. So you agree with the participants on the size of land to use. Let's say, is it 0.2 hectares to mean large area, or 0.1 hectares to mean a large area as well. So you need to have a clear cut on the area which you are going to base on, and also on the number of households. When you say many, is it 50%? So the sample that we are working with will be the representative sample for representing the households. Let's say 50% of the group, then it shall mean that it is grown by many households. Below that, then it shall mean that it is grown by few households. These two will also give conservation interventions. For example, Juliet mentioned about participatory plant breeding, participatory variety enhancement. These are done under those crops that are found in the cell of small area and many households. For those crops found under small area and a few households, these are crops that are going towards extinction. So you really need to collect them, conserve them on farm, and also multiply the seed. So roughly, this is how the four cell analysis is used. You have to list the crops that are grown in that area, and then you facilitate by asking the participants, you are representative sample, to say, is it grown on a small area or a bigger area? Is it grown by many households or few households? You also need to document the reasons why a crop is grown on a large piece of land by many households, or is grown on a small piece of land by fewer households. So you really need to get those reasons. So this is a tool that is used. So for your sample, you need to have farmers who are well knowledgeable, as mentioned earlier, that you need to have farmers who are well knowledgeable. So you need the elderly because they possess a lot of knowledge about the crop diversity that is grown in that area. Also need to have women, because women are the custodians of our crop diversity, and they also possess a lot of information. And for the sake of continuity and passing on information from the older generation to the younger generation, you also need to involve the youth. So when inviting the participant for this tool, you take deliberate measures to involve the elderly, the youth, as well as the women. Once you do that, then you embark on a collection mission to collect the materials that will be used to store the seed bank. So under corrections, there are a lot of stuff that we were supposed to do. You visit the farmers who have the diversity, you write the information about the variety, where it is grown, how it is used, the meaning of the names, its characteristic, whether it is resilient to some stresses relating to the environment. So you document all that information. You also georeference, if possible, where you have collected that material, so that at least you can go back if you lose a material. So about land, you also need to establish crop diversity block on that land. This is just a demonstration of the diversity found in that area. It is a very important toolkit when managing crop genetic resources, because it acts as a field where farmers can interface with extension workers, research workers. The farmers can conduct field days as part of raising awareness in the community about the importance of these farmer varieties, which are very crucial in establishing resilient farming systems. The diversity block will also act as a field for multiplying the collected germplasm, because during collection missions, you collect little samples that you multiply by and by. A very important component on managing community seed banks is seed multiplication in farmers' fields. Because when you multiply seed in farmers' field, you have a bigger field and you are assured that you are going to get at least large volumes of seed to have to stock the community seed bank. So you need to select farmers who have knowledge about the seed that they are going to multiply. And also you need to provide training to the farmers. We have done training in seed multiplication, quality control, selection, and distribution, because you want to maintain the genetic purity, you want to maintain the physical purity, you want in the end to produce very good seed that farmers can access from the community seed bank. And one of the important committee that is crucial in following up these seed multiplication plots is the seed committee. So besides the management committee, you also establish a seed committee, which is responsible for the technical work on seed. So it will be visiting those farmers who access the seed to see whether they really planted the seed. You know, the communities are very tricky. Some farmers, they can just consume the seed. So they really follow up those farmers who access the seed to ensure that they are following the recommended practices, maintaining field hygiene, and also this committee will be keeping record. It's not a big committee. You can have a committee of 5 people who will be then visiting the farmers within the community. So the seed committee will be reporting to the management committee. One of the important activity that is also done is quality control. As you can see, the bambara nut there are looking so beautiful to show that relay seed banks can produce quality seed. So in order for farmers to produce quality seed, there are factors that you have to consider. For example, land history, as well as the fertility of the soil. You don't want to grow your seed in a poor soil. It means you get very, very poor seeds, but you want to grow seed in a fertile piece of land. And you also look at history of that land. What crops were grown before the seed you are about to multiply? If they are of the same varieties, you have high chances of pests and diseases passed from the previous crop to the new crop. And you don't want your seeds to have diseases, because in the end, you are going to get very poor seed. You also need to maintain genetic purity. So that is achieved through isolation. For some crops, it's difficult, especially for those cross-pollinated crops, and mostly maize, because it is a common crop. So it is not easy to achieve the distance, the isolation. We use isolation by distance. For some crops, you can have 5 meters, some 100 meters, And the distance can be longer, up to 400 meters sometimes, depending on the nature of pollination of that particular crop. You can also do the isolation in time, where crops are those crops that have they are of the same variety but matures at the different time period. They can be planted together. The one with early maturing will grow faster than the one with late maturing, and in so doing, you have already isolated them. So there won't be some contamination. You also can isolate through space, where you can plant your materials during off-season through irrigation. And another important activity is removing off types, because you don't want to have seed that is contaminated. So you have to remove those crops that are not the ones you planted. You really need to know the growth characteristics of the variety you have planted. So farmers know their varieties and they are able to remove these off types. And we encourage farmers to remove before they flower, because once you remove after flowering, then contamination has already been done. The issues of plant nutrition are very important. You need to add organic manure, because you want to produce very quality seed. You want to maintain physical purity, so you ensure that you have got a very clean seed that won't have chaff and other debris and what have you. Once you achieve that, you harvest, then you now need to consider issues of storing the seed. And one of the most important activity of a seed bank is to store seed, because you can lose the quality of seed during the process of storage. Juliet mentioned about participatory variety selection as one of the most important activities. So farmers, they also do that. I will not talk much about that. My friend touched about that. So it's also one of the most important activities that farmers do. But I will spend a bit of my time on the seed processing and the storage. You need to harvest seeds that are physiologically mature, because controlling quality starts from the field, even during harvesting. If you harvest seeds that haven't matured, reached physiological maturity, you are harvesting poor quality seeds and seeds with a lot of moisture, and chances of losing that seed load becomes very high. You need to thresh, removing the straw from the seed. Once you do that, then you start drying. Drying is very, very important if you are to keep seed for a long period of time. You can dry your seeds up to, let's say, 14 or 12% moisture content, and you have to make sure that the drying process is very slow. You shouldn't subject to high temperatures when you're drying the seed, because in the end, you get a very hard seed coat and the seed won't dry properly. Farmers do not have sophisticated materials to measure the moisture content. So we use indigenous knowledge that the farmers have. For example, they can cut the seed using the teeth, and if it is producing a clicking sound, farmers will know that the seed is dry. They can put it in an empty tin and try to shake. If it is producing a very loud noise, then they know the seed is dry. And most importantly, the farmers, they have very rich knowledge about their seeds. Just looking at the seed, holding it, they know the seed is really dry. You also need to clean, to remove the chaff, other material, foreign materials that are not related to your seed. You also need to grade, so that you isolate those that are damaged, mechanically damaged, those that are damaged by pest. You also isolate them. And one of the also important activity is treating the seed. You don't want to lose your seed because of pathogens, because of rodents. You know, the pathogens will also be looking for that seed as a source of nutrients. So you need to use local available materials. You can use ash, wood ash. You can use tobacco leaves that are added to the seed. Sometimes farmers, they also use sand, and they have to keep their seed in airtight containers. In the picture there, farmers are processing the seed. They are grading and putting it in a sack, sacks for backing. all the materials that are used to store the seed, you really need to label them. Whether you are using sacks, you are using glass jars, you label them. But because we want to increase seed, mostly when we have larger volumes, we use sacks. But for those germplasm part, we can use glass jars. Then once that is done, then you have to distribute the seed to the communities. So farmers, as you can see in the pictures, access seed from these community seed banks. What we do with the farmers, they access seed on loan basis. For example, if they get 10 kg seed, the farmers will pay back, say, 15 kg. So in a way, the seed loans will also facilitate the increase of seed because they are adding a little more to what they acquired to ensure that the seed bank always has seed. The seed committee would also be responsible for doing the inspections to ensure that the farmers are really planting the seed. We have done some germination tests before to ensure that farmers are getting high quality seed. So these germination tests are very important. You just plant, say, 100 seeds on a newspaper, you add some water, and then you count those that have germinated. Juliet mentioned about seed fairs as one way of increasing awareness and also a platform for lobbying for recognition of farmers' rights. Farmers have a right to share, sell, and exchange their seed as is enshrined in the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. So these seed fairs are very important because these farmers, they also access germplasm to increase the genetic pool of their materials. In order to have vibrant community seed banks, you need linkages. For example, linking the seed banks to national gene banks, because through national gene banks, you can access materials, lost materials. You also need to involve the youth from schools, research institutes, the academia. The research institutes will be important for participatory plant breeding. The extension workers from the government will be providing technical backstopping to farmers on how to multiply seed. You also link the seed banks to like-minded organizations as well as the community structures, the leaders, so that there is that continued support to continue with the seed bank work. Yeah, I have talked a lot. This is the end. You know, we have to conserve agrobiodiversity because it is what fits us. Thank you very much. At this point, I will hand over to you, Francis, and I'll be open to taking questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frederick. I saw in our Zoom group that Juliet has said that we should organize an exchange between CTT seed breeders and community seed banks and BCI. And this is exactly what it is to be able to share all of this information and these lessons between us. So thank you so much. There's been a lot of very good questions that have been coming through. So please do continue to put those into the Q&A. We have 15 minutes left. And I just want to direct one initial question firstly to Frederick. It's more of just a technical question on sharing. Is curious about the constitutional part and also sharing guidelines on constitutions. But I think also is this question of governance of seed banks and community seed banks, because it's really important. Are they held by the community and by farmers, or are they held by outside organizations? And I think BCI is very experienced at that, at working with farmers, so that they really are owned by farmers themselves and that they're very involved right from the get-go. So maybe, Frederick, you can share a little bit on that. How do farmers really make sure that they're part and parcel of seed banks and owning them and the governance of them right from the beginning? Could you share a bit on that?
Yes, thank you. Really, the governance part is very important because we want groups that are well organized and they are also following the rules. So For example, when I'm about to facilitate the establishment of these rules and regulations, it won't be me listing down what we could. I'll just be there facilitating. So it will come from the farmers, what they really want to include, so that the farmers, they own the rules and regulations that they have made. But also you will see that along the way, maybe after some seasons, farmers will be seeing gaps depending on what issues they are facing. Then the farmers will go back to their constitution and revise it. So I'm just there to facilitate, but most of the contents of these rules and regulations, they should come from the farmers themselves, because they are the ones who will be holding each other responsible based on what they developed. So there must be some ownership. So it should be farmers developing this constitution, while an extension worker or a conservationist should just be there doing the facilitation. Yeah, I think that answers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. And I know that you've also, BCI, I've also been working very closely to also then support, facilitate that process with the communities, but also then link those communities to, you know, you've been working with the international treaties so that farmers can also really ensure that their rights are respected, and to share then with other organizations, because then, you know, that's really building the strength and the power of farmers, because now these seed banking initiatives are happening, these seed fairs that are really expressing farmers' rights in practice across the region. So it's then, I guess, facilitating farmers at that level and linking them to others doing the same kind of work. So,
Yes.
So thank you, Frederick. So there was a question on hybrid seeds, and that was during Juliet's presentation. She did say that she was going to answer it live, and I think this is very important because it goes back to the basis again of really unpacking the need to continuously always be breeding and improving crops, rather than just being able to store them ex situ and then we can use them again in 5 years' time. What happens to crops, and why is this kind of work really important? So perhaps, Juliet, you can come in and answer that one. And if there are more questions for Fred, please do continue to put them in the Q&A. Juliet, are you here with us?
Yes. I am here. I don't know, am I still there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, there's something that has popped up on my screen. Okay, yeah, so I think there was a question on, can you multiply hybrids? Can you multiply hybrids? Can you reuse them for the next season? Can you do the actual multiplication? So your hybrid crops, your hybrid maize that you have, it is bred in such a way that it will only be used for that particular season. When you want to use it the next season, your yield drastically goes down because it is not meant to be reused again. So there are methods of breeding that actually you can use that creates OPVs. I think in my presentation, I had shown that we've developed OPVs. So there are varieties that are developed that can be recycled maybe for a period of 3 years or so, because they're OPV. But why is it that we have engaged in also participatory plant breeding? And we're calling it participatory because it involves breeding with the end users or the farmers who are the users of the materials. Our focus is actually to work on those crops that will not be focused a lot by breeders who are in the commercial sector, because their focus is also on ensuring that they are making profit. But our focus is to ensure that we have farmers in the communities have access to seed, and the seed is available, and the quality of that seed is improved. I think there was a discussion of, in Frederick's presentation, you've seen how they're improving the quality, grading and sorting, taking it to the seed bank and taking it out of the seed bank. We need we are alive to the fact that the climate is changing. So if we are just continuously storing seed in community seed bank and not making it adapted to the climate, then we will not, we will not benefit from that germplasm. In nature, naturally, if crops are left, to be in nature, they would continuously also breed by themselves. So we're actually just coming in and, doing interventions that, help the plant breeding process. And if you saw in the presentation, a lot of our work is based on participatory plant breeding, bringing in new materials in the communities and adapting them, enhancing the materials that have lost traits so that they're back to their beautiful form. Then there was also a question around, can hybrid seed be produced in an organic manner? So when we're talking about seed breeding, we're talking about even the way it's a natural process that plants breed. But when you start introducing other, genes in a material that is out of a species boundary, then that now ceases to be, it becomes genetically modified, it ceases to be, I don't think I would want to regard it as organic. You start introducing chemicals in it, like fertilizers and, these herbicides that people use in breeding, then you are not now producing organic seed. But in the seed breeding that we're doing at community level, we've actually seen farmers, because we say let's breed crops in a way that we live in the community here. How are these crops going to adapt? And if we're going to start breeding in a way that it is done at maybe a breeding research institute, we will not adapt, because that's what we are not doing in the community. But we've seen people actually in their research plots, they're applying organic matter, organic manure, and not even applying the chemicals. So I think it is very possible that we could have actually organic seed, even in the other industry. I've seen a comment from Seb, hybridization of seed is allowed under organic farming, GMO is not. Yes. I hope it clears the position.
Exactly. Hybridization is maize bred with maize.
GMOs
is maize bred with who knows what else.
A mosquito or a frog or something.
So GMOs are most definitely not allowed. But often I think hybrids are bred that they're bred to need to be grown with chemical fertilizers and a lot of herbicides often. And so that's why the distinction is often within organic systems is sometimes farmers prefer to use their local OPVs. There was a very, very important question. Thank you, Juliet, for that. And I hope that answered the question. And I'm going to hand this over to Fred. Please, we only have 5 minutes left. So just really about what are the standards that are maintained at the seed banks and the communities that you're doing, the seed testing and the quality confirmation, so germination testing, these kind of things are really important. So I think, Frederick, can you give us an answer there? I know that you work a lot with the local standards testing, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. As I mentioned that to maintain viability of a seed is also a function of storage. So you need to have good structures and materials for storing the seed. In the community seed banks, we have storerooms where they are thatched with glass, just to make sure that temperatures are not high. So one of the factors you consider in storing seed is temperature. So the grasses will really reduce the temperatures in the storing room. And also you look at moisture, because moisture is very detrimental. You will end up losing the seed to fungus. So you want to keep seed that is very, very dry. And once you have dry seed, you are able to keep it for a long period of time. And also we ensure that there is minimal light entering the room. So most of the rooms are really dark, and light is also another important factor when storing seed, as well as humidity. So you need to control these factors so that they are at a very, very low level. Once you do that, it means you are able to keep seed for a very long period of time. And you also need to control your seed from pest damage. We have worked with our colleagues from the research department to help us in carrying out a germination test. But we usually do that when we have kept seed for over 2 seasons, because we don't want farmers to access poor quality seed. Then the seed banks won't work. We want farmers to access quality seed. So we engage our colleagues from the research stations to conduct the germination test. So now you see the importance of linking the seed bank to all these players. So they can get samples from the seeds from the seed banks that we work with, and they take them to the research station. So they give us a report on their findings and recommendations. So we follow those recommendations. But locally, we also do our own test at a small scale. We use, local newspapers. We can put our seeds, let's say 100. We add water, we cover them, we put them in a dark place and wait for the seeds to germinate. And we can count those that have germinated properly and do the arithmetic to find the percentage. So those are some of the simple things that we do, just to make sure that farmers are able to access quality seed. In some cases, sand can be used, where you just collect sand, get a sample of your seed, and then plant in that sand, and then you apply some water and you wait for the seed to germinate. Really, those are some of the simple tests that can be carried out. Remember, we're working at a community level. We don't have all these sophisticated materials, so we use locally available materials. Yeah. Thank you, Francis.
Frederick, thank you. And we are now out of time, but I think it is very important to answer that point around the quality assurance. And I know that CTDT do a lot of work with that as well. Of course, farmers are always doing their own quality assurance tests as well. So I think that there's a lot more discussion we could have. I've just seen the Q&A section. We could have a whole discussion on the differences between OPVs and hybrids and GMOs, and the chemicals that are coated on these, and what is allowed in organic and agroecological production and what is not. And there's some very, very important questions that have been quite insightful, that shows the kind of things that maybe we need to do some more presentations on, and ask for some expert sharing on that. We will also address these in the report that comes out. So Frederick, as you were the last speaker, I'm not going to hand back to you. Juliet, did you have any final words to share?
Yeah, just thank you for listening. And I think just to say that this work is important, I would encourage that everyone, we start slowly doing this kind of work, because one, climate has changed, but in the near future where we're going, issues around seed will become tighter and tighter, pertaining to regulation, and we will still need to address access and availability in the communities. But we need to ensure that we're placing the ownership of plant genetic resources in the hands of the farming communities. We need to ensure that we're dealing with biopiracy, because I believe that there's no person who came from wherever with seeds. We all found these genetic resources here, and they should be owned by all. Thank you.
Julia, thank you. You've said it all. So I think just a huge thank you to Juliet Nangamba from Community Technology Development Trust here in Zambia, where I am, and Frederick Sanga from Biodiversity Conservation Initiative in northern Malawi in Mzuzu. Frederick, thank you. I'm not going to open again to you if that's okay. Thank you. And we are going to do a report of this and share information. There's been a lot of emails. Please do put your email address in the chat box if you haven't already. And also don't forget that we'll be talking about soil fertility options and the practicalities of that. Next week, we have two specialists, one from Zambia and one from Namibia. So really looking at what are the soil fertility best practices for farmers in quite different agroecological contexts under resource constrained conditions. And this is really, really important as we all think about going into what is our growing season, but also on the back of potentially bad rains, a lot of burning. What does this mean for farmers and how can we really improve our soil and maintain soil health? So thank you so much. It has been absolutely wonderful. And Juliet, Fred, thank you again. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate your support. And please do share your feedback and any more questions. Please do email us. The email addresses are there in the chat box, and also is on the information sheets and on the Zoom registration. So thank you all very much and have a great rest of your day. See you all next week. Bye.